In Book 11, we're off to the Underworld. One of the first things, though, that we notice about Homer's Underworld is it's not really under anywhere. It's far away. Odysseus and his men go to the place where Circe told them to go. When they do, they dig a trench. And then in that trench, they put in some potions of ram's blood and some milk and barley and the things that they are told to put in. And when they do, up out of the earth come these shades. So Odysseus does not actually spend time going down, 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 a la Dante, and Dante modeled himself, of course, on Virgil. Things are a little different in that underworld. For Odysseus, it's a faraway place, out of contact with you and I, but it's because it's so far away, not because it's so far down. We've put together some pictures of kind of sulfurous openings in the earth that might be more reminiscent of what Homer's Underworld is than trying to imagine it as some kind of down cave deep beneath the earth, down beneath the recesses of things. Now, in order to get these shades to come out and make conversation with them, Odysseus has this bait. And inside of the trough, one of the ingredients in the bait is blood. And there's a kind of physics involved here, or biology. The shades need to get blood. And why would that be? Well, these shades are just human beings like you and I who've lost all their blood and their substance, and now they're just kind of floating around disembodied. If they had more blood in them, life would return to them. Getting the blood in them allows them to now talk. And Odysseus can have conversations with them. They don't get fully re-embodied, though, as we learn in that very famous scene of Odysseus trying to hug his mother. They are insubstantial shades. Being a shade is not a happy thing to be. The Greeks would much rather be alive than be dead. Can't quite make a universal law out of this one, but among the Greeks it's surely true. It's better to be alive than to be dead. The afterlife for them in Homer's time is not a place, for the most part, where ethical scores are settled. It's not as though those who have died in this underworld are getting judged and punished if they've done bad things and rewarded if they've done good things. Mostly they're all just kind of floating around in this gray area, and they would all much rather be alive. Even the great ones don't seem to have a very good life at all. They would much rather be living. We hear this in this kind of poignant piece that we'll close with in thinking about this, about what comes out of Achilles' mouth when Odysseus has a chance to talk to him in person. So the underworld is not a place where ethical scores are settled. It's a holding tank. It's a place you'd rather not be. It's kind of like being on an eternal layover at an airport. It's not like living. It's not necessarily actively being punished, but it's just not like living a rich, full life. There are, of course, a few exceptions to this rule about the underworld being a place where ethical scores are not settled. There's one or two where we see very famous sinners down there that are getting eternal punishment. People like Tantalus and Sisyphus, famous ones. But they're the exception. For the most part, it is not a place where good and bad ends, just desserts, are being meted out. Another exception that some of you all will hear about is the Islands of the Blessed. This maybe has been something that you've run into in your own engagement with Greek mythology. It's something that we'll see in our story, articulated at a few points. But for the most part, this is not a fully worked out idea. It's a smaller piece of the larger set of ideas about what the afterlife is all about. Not necessarily all that widespread of a notion. We'll talk about that further on in the course. Now, when Odysseus puts out his trough, we do get to see Elpenor. Poor guy. There he is. What the heck happened to you? Where have you been? And he says, well, I'm dead. And Odysseus and men can't believe it. What Elpenor gets to do is give us a full-throated endorsement of the idea that you should be buried. Elpenor tells Odysseus and his men, please bury me. It's what we dead want. And a functionalist would come along again and read this story and say, clearly what Homer is doing here is providing a sense of legitimacy to the social, cultural, religious custom of burying dead bodies. Clearly the dead want that. It comes out of the mouth of Elpenor himself. So we run into this guy. Look at him. He's kind of insubstantial in this wonderful decoration on our Greek pottery. There's Odysseus has sacrificed the animals. Hermes is there next to him. Hermes, who has control over souls on their way to the underworld, guiding Odysseus here. And Elpenor, who shows up with his hand raised in a gesture saying, "Oh my gosh, Odysseus, if only you had been able to save me. Things would have been much better for me, but instead I'm dead. Please bury me." Then we get early on to the point of why we're out in that underworld in the first place. We get to see this figure, Tiresias. He's the whole reason we're there. Tiresias is Apollo's priest. He has deep wisdom of not only the future. Remember, being a seer in ancient Greece is not just about seeing future events, it's also about seeing the present in a way that you and I as typical mortals are not able to see details. It's also about seeing the past in a way that you and I, as typical mortals, may not have a memory about this past. Well, a seer is able to see past, present, and future, and it's marvelous that they're able to do any of these things. So when Odysseus goes to Tiresias to ask him some help, Tiresias answers back, well, there has indeed been a problem, Odysseus. You have run afoul of Poseidon. It's here that Odysseus gets the message that it's time for him to make amends. He has to apologize to Poseidon for the awful thing he did to that guy Polyphemus, happens to be Poseidon's son, and he gets the orders from Tiresias. The punishment seems to be a little strange at first. What Tiresias says is you have to take an oar, so an implement of pulling a boat along the water, and bring it so far inland that people don't recognize it anymore. They can't tell what it is. And once you get there, plant the oar in the ground and build a temple to Poseidon. Now, why in the world would Tiresias tell Odysseus that that's what he should do to make Poseidon feel better? Well, gods like to be worshipped, it's true. Gods enjoy it when we worship them, and they like to be worshipped widely. So Poseidon's temples mostly are nearby the sea. Those that live near the sea know of Poseidon's powers and worship him. Those that are inland may or may not have even heard of him. So what Odysseus is doing here is spreading the fame of Poseidon even beyond areas of the landscape that are affected by the sea. Getting so far inland that people would mistake his oar for a winnowing fan and think of it, in other words, as a farming implement, means that Odysseus is far enough inland that it will be a great pleasure for Poseidon to receive a temple in that spot. So having gotten those instructions now, Odysseus knows what he's supposed to do. He's got what he needs. But we're not going to leave the underworld quite yet. There's more stuff for us to learn down there. We run into others among the dead. They come out, drink some blood, and have a conversation with Odysseus. Odysseus gets to learn from all these dead people in the past, some amazing stuff. He gets to hear about. He sees not only his mother. He has a quick conversation with. It's also quite sad and poignant because they're unable to embrace. She's dead. We hear from lots of female heroes and the adventures they've gone through. Then at the end of this catalog of famous women, all of a sudden we hear a voice we haven't heard for a while, Alcinous. We might all of a sudden be thinking to ourselves, my goodness, is Alcinous down there in the underworld? Well, this is Homer's way of breaking the flow of the narrative, interrupting things to give us a change of pace, reminding us that actually, hey, guess what? Remember, you are on the island of Scheria, and Odysseus is telling Alcinous and his people the story. Odysseus seems to be quite tired and exhausted. Alcinous breaks in and says, well, please, Odysseus, go on and tell us more. Odysseus then jumps in, carries back on with the narrative, and starts to tell us stories about the heroes of the ancient past. Here I've got a picture of an oar that we're going to mistake for a winnowing fan if we bring it far enough inland. Odysseus is going to start to learn some of the adventures of the great male heroes that he runs into in the underworld. He gets to see his dead compatriots. He sees Agamemnon. And remember the story of Agamemnon. We've already seen it repeated to us several times as people are trying to educate Tiresias. They tell him, listen, when Agamemnon was killed, his son came in and righted things in his house. Here we get to meet the real Agamemnon. And Agamemnon has a further message for Odysseus, which is, be careful when you go home. You're not going to know what happened. You've been gone for a long time, and look at me. My wife killed me. She took up a relationship with someone else, so when you go home, be cautious. Now this message is not going to be lost on Odysseus. He's a very clever and cautious man. Of course they have back and forth and talk about, well, Penelope's a much better woman than Clytemnestra ever was, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But still, this message is going to get locked into Odysseus, and he is going to be cautious when he gets home. Watch out when you get there. We're also going to meet this wonderful Greek hero, Achilles. You see him here lying down on the ground. Awful scene. Achilles does indeed get killed. Does not happen in the Iliad. Homer, this is the place where he talks about the killing of Achilles. It doesn't happen in the Iliad. And we get to hear from Achilles this long, poignant conversation with Odysseus, or somewhat long, intense conversation with Odysseus, that says, you know what, all that glory, I opted for a short, glorious life on the battlefield. Well, I would rather be a slave down here in the underworld, taking care of other people in the lowliest social position than try to I would rather be a slave up there and still alive, taking care of other people's menial tasks, than be the grand person that I am and be locked down here among the dead. It comes out of Achilles' mouth at an interesting point in the Iliad, just the opposite kind of sentiment, saying that no, he'd really rather live a glorious short life, get killed, but still have a great, powerful social standing and become a hero, than to opt for a life of leisure and being a servant to other people and not having that grand and glorious life. He seems to reverse himself here in Book 11, again underscoring just how awful it is to be dead. Well, luckily for us, Odysseus and his men are not dead. They get to the underworld and get away. Unlike most of us, getting to the underworld is something that sadly is easy for fragile organisms such as we are. Getting out is the trick. Odysseus does indeed get away from this place, and he gets out. From here, they're going to have to take care of some business with their friend Elpenor, get some clues for what to do next from their new friend, or their friend of just a year, Circe, and then from there, it's going to be off to the land of the Sirens.